Good afternoon. I'm calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined by council members Warsami, Kano, and Andrew Johnson, and we are a quorum of the committee. First on our agenda, we have two quick consent items, so I'll just read those and see if anyone would like to pull anything off. The first is our contract with Fagery BD Consulting for federal representation services. And this action includes receiving and filing the ethics officer report pursuant to Minneapolis ordinance relating to conflict of interest review, and also authorizing a contract not to exceed $114,000 for federal representation services in Washington, D.C. from November 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2017, with the option to extend the contract on an annual basis at the sole discretion of the city for 2 additional years. The second item is a response to the FERC notice of availability of draft environmental assessment for Crown Mill hydroelectric project. And this action includes receiving and filing the draft comments in response to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's notice of availability of draft environmental assessment for the Crown Mill hydroelectric project, and also authorizing the Community Planning and Economic Development Department's Executive Director or designee to submit comments on behalf of the city. And so with that, I'll go ahead and move both of those items. Any discussion requested on either item? I am not seeing any, so all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, and those items are approved. Next, we are to our discussion items, and for our first discussion item, we are very privileged to welcome our United States Representative, Keith Ellison, and to give us an overview on work going on in Congress and some input on the national scene and how that relates to work that we're doing here in Minneapolis. And we're so happy that you're able to join us here, Congressman Ellison.
Well, let me thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and all the council members. Certainly appreciate the work you do every day. I'd like you to know that the 5th Congressional District has about 16 cities in it. And of course, Minneapolis is the biggest by far. Minneapolis is probably 55 to 52% of the whole congressional district. But I try to make it my goal to visit every single city council every single year. And so this is a part of a visit we do to check in with you. As you know, we work with you, all of you, all the time on everything. But just one visit for at least that, to just sort of check in on some of the key issues. I appreciate the time, and I definitely appreciate the work that you do, because in a normal week, I'm getting on a plane on a Monday, and I'm not coming home till Thursday or Friday. It's just impossible for me to be as in touch with local community as you are, but I'm comfortable knowing that you are talking directly to constituents about their most pressing issues all the time. I'm grateful for the work you do. I respect the expertise that you bring, and I thank you. Because we are all doing this thing together. And on that score, thanks for the changes that you have made to make it easier for people to vote. I can tell you right now that the 4 stations that the city of Minneapolis made available for people to access no excuse absentee voting, it's working, it's helpful, it will reduce lines on election day, it makes it so that people who may not have an amenable schedule on election day can just take care of that business early. And when you talk to folks and ask them, why didn't you vote? They will tell you the most prominent reason is that they didn't have time. And if you're an upper middle class person with a good income and a lot of flexibility on the job, that may sound like a weak excuse. But if you are a mom trying to hold together 2 or 3 jobs, getting on public transportation, you know, that's reality. And so this is an important thing that you're doing, and I commend you for it. You know, I work on voting, you work on voting, the state probably pulls the major oar on voting, but you here at the city of Minneapolis are doing your good part to make sure we're always fighting to make sure people can be part of democracy. Promise Zone. As you know, it's a federal HUD program The design of the program, if I were running things, I'd make it a little different. I think applying for a federal grant is hard. It's a big, giant lift, and anybody who wants to apply for a federal grant, and the city, of course, has applied for many, it's a major staff undertaking. But we have what we have. Promise Zone gives extra points for people who apply for the program within the Promise Zone. It's very important for you to know that you do not have to be in the Promise Zone to benefit from the Promise Zone. In fact, I was at Urban Ventures just the other day telling them that if they're serving people who are from the Promise Zone, which is located on the north side, then they can also apply for those grants. You all are, I know Julianne Learson, my office, and she are working closely together. We just want to be at your service and help in any way that we can. We've had grant workshops on applying for federal grants. We are committed to making sure that we can help people who might want to benefit from the Promise Zone program. And we appreciate that you all have applied for this program and want to do all we can to help facilitate things. My office will submit a letter with any federal application. We will make calls. We will do what we have to do to get more resources to the people who need them in our town. Southwest, and by the way, stop me at any point you want to talk about a particular topic that I'm raising. Southwest Light Rail Transit. Boy, haven't we all been lifting that for quite a while? And you know what? I want to commend the Minneapolis City Council for your critical role on this. I want to commend the governor for his critical role on this. And half the money is coming from the federal government, so I have always felt very much a part of this. And 2/3 of the line is going to be in the 5th Congressional District. As you know, I represent St. Louis Park, represent Hopkins, represent the number of communities where it will go through. Your assistance on this is key, but I just want to tell you, again, I couldn't be more committed to this project. The Met Council recently approved funding option that will complete the 50% local share needed to receive the federal funding. This is leadership, in my opinion. And I know you've gone through a lot of tough times with this. I mean, there are very sticky issues, and I know that there's not unanimity on the council on all the issues regarding Southwest, and we'll just leave it right there. But I am willing to promise you that when this line is done, all of us will look back and be glad that we did it. Now, I don't know if you're there with me yet, but I'm telling you, it will end up being a very good thing for our metropolitan area. Going to D.C. every week as I do, that metro is indispensable. When it breaks down, you see how indispensable it is. And the rich folks in Georgetown, so upset that they took a NIMBY attitude when the line was going in. I'm telling you, we're doing the right thing here, and I thank you for stepping up. And I'll continue to advocate with the Department of Transportation, Secretary Fox, anyone who needs to be talked to, I'm there on that. Now, Botno, equally committed on Botno. Botno is key. I have told people who live in the Northwestern corridor that if Southwest falls, it's not going to make you any better off. In fact, that might just mean we're going to walk away from light rail transit. But I understand the Met Council recently met all of their necessary environmental review. This means the project will be seeking the state share of its funding in the 2017 legislature. And again, I'm all in on this, and we'll be seeking federal support for it. It's just going to help. It's going to take, I don't have to tell you, it's going to take cars off the road. It's going to cut greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to get people to work who don't have the income to sustain a car. It's going to be a good thing, and I appreciate your support of that. Now, the Orange Line, big deal, huge. I'm 100% in for that. If there's nothing I won't do to help the Orange Line. And there have been hiccups along the way, and it's been a long time coming, but I'm glad that the region took an important step in applying for the federal funding for the Orange Line. The Orange Line and 35W Access Project are vital projects for the connecting residents in Minneapolis to jobs and economic opportunity throughout the region. I want to know from you what else I can do to help the Orange Line. It's a fundamental project of ours, and we, Mike Siebenow is here with me, and we're ready to take notes from you on what else you think we could or should be doing. Honestly, I'm for transit, and I'm trying to move people, not cars, and because that's what we really need to be doing. And so the Orange Line is key on that.
So, Congressman Ellison, thank you. I just want to say we know that you have been there 100% on these major regional transit projects, and we really appreciate your help. On the Orange Line in particular, there are, and of course on Botano and Southwest, but there still remain some outstanding requests that are being made for federal funding. I think I always mix them up, but a small starts grant or that's right. So we have a small starts grant that is outstanding. And so I just wanted to mention again that we are very appreciative of your support. The Orange Line, there become a lot of pressures on these large transit projects. The Orange Line is further complicated because it is also associated with a large MnDOT bridge construction project relating to their Chapter 152 bridges, which have to start work at a certain time. And so that's created additional pressure. So I just wanted to mention how appreciative we are of your support. I think that we're kind of about over all the humps on this, but still have a little bit left to go. Didn't know if you have any more comments on that, but I think the other question I just have is anything you'd like to say to us about, just our standing as a region with the federal government and any additional comments you'd like to make about that. We care very much about our standing and our ability to be competitive for many, many items, but transit being one of them.
Well, let me tell you, Vice President Glidden, Minneapolis has an excellent reputation. The Twin Cities do, from a federal standpoint. When I talk to people at the highway or even the secretary, they consider us a region that has our act together, which kind of makes me worried when you look up under the hood and see some of the real challenges that we've had to get to, yes, on certain things. But I think that the reputation we've enjoyed, we should be holding that as a very precious asset, and we shouldn't jeopardize it. So that is my position on that. And I could tell you, I go to D.C., Denver, Seattle, several cities in Texas, Chicago, and my job just brings me to those places. And I'm telling you that we are in a very competitive situation with regard to those other cities, particularly like Seattle and Denver, Portland, places like that. And they would love to be able to say to a young professional person with a, fancy degree, hey, come live here, don't live there. And I think that we are competing for talent. We are competing for tourists. We're competing for a business location. And we have got to make these investments to be that 21st century city that we are and can become. I think because we have had a pretty good region, we haven't had to think about how we stay competitive as a region. But it's just gotten a lot more competitive, and so we've got to be on the forefront, particularly on this transit thing, because the transit thing is very important to people who are concerned about global climate change, people who are tired of cars. A lot of millennials don't want a car or want to park it and use it on the weekend. I was talking to Councilmember Johnson about how we're not even going to be driving cars no more. We're going to be in driverless cars. Is that right, Councilmember? And so. We've just got to stay on the very forefront of that. But let me just mention to you another issue that I think all of us are concerned about is the riverfront. Now, I hope I'm not wading into rough waters here, but I believe that riverfront is one of the most wonderful things about our region. And I'm talking about the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River, I worked very hard to pass legislation to close the lock and dam. Thank you for your support. Senator Klobuchar and I, and then there was this one staff member who's right from this town named Ann Christensen. I got to invoke her name because she worked so hard, and we did it to protect the river from the carp. But as we closed that lock and dam, it opened up a whole new set of possibilities for what that river could be. President Johnson and I have talked about the possibility of capping 94 so people could get a little bit more access to the river. I know this is not without its controversial points, but I think we agree that connecting people on the north side to the river is really important. But a little bit south of there, right near the lock and dam, the upper lock, and even on the lower one, we have a real opportunity. And I think that, well, I'm going to submit comments, which I do by November 2nd, regarding to the Federal Energy Agency, to FERC, on how Crown Hydro needs to fit in to a riverfront project that takes into consideration the needs and interests of the public, or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's not an appropriate project. Remember, when this project was first contemplated, the lock was open. It was industrial. That's what everybody expected it to be. That's what it was. Now that the lock has closed, and now that the price point of solar and wind has dropped, investing major resources in a hydroelectric project on our precious river space either has to fit into what the public's needs are or needs to be deprioritized. That's my opinion. That's what I'm going to say to FERC. And I share that with you because I'd like to share with you what my thinking is on it. It is possible to do both. But quite frankly, I haven't heard from the people who are pushing from Crown Hydro. I'd like to hear from them. I do plan on reaching out to them. But I think they need to get together with the people who are looking at designs for the river. They need to talk to the park board, to the city of Minneapolis, if they want to be part of it. But in my view, they have to either be part of it or not be part, or not have the project. But they cannot be the priority, because we don't need what they are offering as badly as we used to because of wind and solar pricing. And that river is just too important to us. When somebody visits the Twin Cities, I like the idea that they're going to go down to a world-class riverfront, and Crown Hydro has to fit into that. Now, I'm not against Crown Hydro, but I do believe that they have to understand that their design needs to fit into what the public needs. Now, I say that knowing that some of you may have different opinions than my own. I respect differences of view, but I just thought I would share with you my thinking on this. I'm prepared to fight any fight to try to make sure that river in the year 2030 is the coolest place in America. And I think it can be. But working out this hydroelectric power plan is part of that. And again, I'm not against it, but it's all about design, really. But if we make them the priority, the design is going to be one thing. If we make the public access the priority that they fit into, then it's going to look another kind of way. And that's what my FERC comments are going to look like. And I'm going to share them with you so that you can either agree, disagree, or disagree with some and agree with others. But I just would like you to know that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Congressman Ellison,
Yeah.
We have a question from Councilmember Johnson, Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Congressmember. I think that's fantastic, and I agree with you, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm curious, kind of connected to that, more south of that area, do you have any updates on Lock and Dam #1 and the disposition study and the hopeful eventual removal and restoration of the river down there? And I might be getting ahead of you on that. You might have already had that lined up, but I just want to ask.
No, actually, I don't have any updates. There's a study being conducted. There's going to be there's a disposition study going on by the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm looking forward to what that's going to say. But I want to let you know that this is a very high priority, and I look forward to their outcomes. My understanding is that sometime in early 2017 they'll be done. If they get done before that, or I definitely want to be in touch with you on this, because no one unit of government is going to be able to sort of like deliver the riverfront for the people the way it should be. So I'm all in favor of working, in conjunction. But I tell you, I'm glad that you're focused on this, because this riverfront is an amenity that we can develop, or it's an amenity that we can let go. However, I'm all in favor of being planful about it. And you go to Chicago, you go down to the Bean on the riverfront. It's iconic. And we have iconic things around here, like the spoon at the garden over there, and we have other things that are iconic. But I think that river could be iconic and really should be iconic. And we have the prettiest part of the river. I mean, I don't want to get provincial relative to St. Paul, but because we love our St. Paul friends and neighbors, but we got the prettiest part of the river up here, and we got the bluffs, we got the gorge, and and I can tell you, I paddle that river, and I'd be interested in going on a paddle with any one of you on the river. And what you're going to see on there, and you might have done it yourself already, you're going to see eagles up there. You're going to see great blue heron up there. And these are all things that people will travel to Minneapolis and pay money to do to help enrich our city. And we should look at that as another offering, in addition to our great sports teams and our great theater and our great parks and our many other things that are awesome. That's something else, but we've got to develop it. Let me move on and say I'm on the Financial Services Committee. And this has been a committee that, has been really active over the last several years, from the mortgage issues to credit card issues to all kinds of things. We recently had a hearing in which John Stumpf, the CEO of Wells Fargo, presented. And I asked him about how their sales program worked. And the thing that I walked away from there is that, one, Wells Fargo is not the only bank that has really high pressure sales metrics, and that running those high pressure sales metrics are actually what helped create a culture where some line workers saw it to be in their interest to create accounts for people that did not ask for them, and open up credit cards where they did not ask for them. And so I think that Wells Fargo, I don't think this is going to be a one and done. I think it's an industry issue that needs to be addressed. And I think smart financial services companies are going to address these sales programs on their own, so they don't end up in a mess. But this obviously is going to affect us in the Twin Cities. The biggest hit for these over 2 million improper transactions is in the South and in California, but we have been affected here. And I think that so I just want to report that to you, that now CEO John Stumpf is going to retire, but when you see 5,300 workers get fired, you gotta wonder whether the problem started higher up than just on those line workers. And so I just mentioned that to you because it's very likely that some of your constituents were impacted by this situation. Which leads me to mention the Consumer Financial Products Bureau, which was ushered in with the Dodd-Frank legislation. To date, there's been over $12 billion returned back to consumers because of investigations of fraud and abuse and improper, unethical practices. So I just let you know that, because there's been a lot of criticism of the CFPB, but there's also been a whole lot of good that they've done. And who have they been protecting? Veterans, seniors, students, people, women who are buying cars. As you know, women pay more for everything, including dry cleaning. And CFPB is on the forefront of trying to equalize that financial injustice. And I mention that because the CFPB will have a role to play as it relates to the whole Wells Fargo debacle, which I think extends beyond Wells Fargo. So I mentioned that to you just as something, so you know that this is something I'm paying a lot of attention to and spending a lot of time working on. I will also let you know that I have
Yeah. Congressman Ellison, I actually had a question on this particular point, and then I know Councilmember Frye also had a question. I'm not sure if it's on this exact point, but kind of on something.
By all means.
So anyway, this topic, all America is watching what's been happening and the hearings that were held relating to Wells Fargo, but kind of all these issues with the credit are much bigger issue.
Absolutely.
And yet we have very few, this is my editorializing here, but very few ways that the consumer has an ability to be protected from abuse. It is very hard as a consumer to identify when you have been taken advantage of.
That's right.
It is hard even if you know you've been taken advantage of. And even then, if you know something's wrong, you're not sure, is this like against the law or what is it? But then it's hard to get help with what do I do to pursue that. And then there are so many other things such as binding arbitration agreements and all these crazy things that then make it so that you do not have the ultimate range of remedies that someone else might have if they were not subject to these contractual agreements that many people don't know that they are now subject to. And so, it's kind of both how do you find what's going on, and then what are the resources to actually investigate and protect the consumer. And so I just want to know if you might comment on that a little bit more. It kind of relates to the other work I know that you're doing about credit score, which I think is another just general area of just absolute abuse of the just average consumer. One example that I'll just tell you on this kind of abuse of the credit score thing is someone, a personal friend of mine, had told me a story about trying to seek an apartment. And this is not, it's been a while since I personally have been seeking an apartment. I own a home today. But now it is much more common that you will be asked to sign a document allowing your landlord to get a credit report on you. And then the landlord is going to make choices about whether or not you're able to rent that apartment or not based on your credit score. There is no relationship necessarily to your ability to pay. Could be a million other factors that have impacted your credit score that now you are redlined out of certain buildings, out of certain neighborhoods. And this is just unleashed predatory behavior affecting the average consumer.
Well, let me just say, you all have been thinking very carefully, deliberately about increasing the minimum wage in Minneapolis. I commend you for that discussion. And every point of view that you all brought to bear to that dialogue, I respect it a lot. It's not a simple issue. But I think there's a general agreement that we need to see people's pay keep up with inflation. But how to do that, I leave that to you all to decide. Here's my point. If you increase the minimum wage and yet the money that the workers make drains right out of their pocket because of some unethical financial services practice, what good have you done? It is essential that consumers in Minneapolis are able to keep the money that they earned. And so, no doubt about it, we have got to be very clear about payday lending. We've got to be very clear about financial services firms that open up fraudulent accounts. And we've got to be policing this area very carefully. And here's the other problem. I happen to know that on this table, I know you got at least 2 lawyers, maybe more. But everybody on here has been a professional in one aspect of their life before they got here. I know that the council president was a nurse, and I know that many of you have done a lot of really important things. But I tell you one thing, none of us are a match for somebody who does mortgages every day, who lends money every day. We just don't know the field well enough to keep up with the more innovative, sharp practices that go on. So we've got to have a watchdog agency. Yes, I'm all in favor of literacy, financial literacy, but it will never replace financial watchdogs like the Consumer Financial Products Bureau. That's why I'm a very strong proponent of it. I don't think that they're perfect. I'd be happy to hold them accountable too, but I'm never going to be saying we need to get rid of them because they're essential. Again, $12 billion returned to consumers already. So the CFPB is one agency that consumers can go to. And I'd like to just offer this to you, that Richard Cordray has told me, he's the director, he'd be willing to come back to Minneapolis when we need him to. And so if you think that it would be good to have him back here, because he's come several times, we can do it. We can have a hearing and we can talk about these things. I'd say the other place to go is our own state attorney general. I think that Lori Swanson, our attorney general, she certainly has legal jurisdiction over these issues. She has sued out these cases. She does care about these issues, and she is a source of protection for the consumer. And of course, you have private agencies that work on these issues on a regular basis. There are private organizations that watchdog financial fraud and are happy to help and do help. Of course, a lot of them run into capacity problems. But I think that it's important for us as policymakers to be very clear that the ability to have a strong, vibrant economy depends not only on people earning decent money, but on them keeping the money that they earn. And do we really want our money going, our consumers' money going into high interest rates, accounts they never opened? Or do we want them going into buying houses in Minneapolis, right? Or do we want to going to Sebastian Joe's and buying ice cream and making sure that the folks who that business is strong, viable, so they can add more staff? And that's the choice we have. So I'm glad to know that we're together on this, because it's really one of the livability issues that makes the difference for a family. So I have a bill that's coming up. We might even get it passed in the lame duck. It's called the Credit Access and Inclusion Act. I'd like you to know that more than 50 million consumers are currently credit invisible. Now think about someone in your family who may be 21, 22 years old. It's not that they got bad credit, they got no credit. And even if they want to get credit to buy a car, or they might have to get you to co-sign for them even though they don't have a record of bad credit. What's the answer? The answer is that if they're paying other bills that are non-credit related on time, those lines should be counted as they form a FICO score or a credit history. So on time cell phones, on time rent payments, my bill would allow these kind of payments to be considered and factored in and reported to FICO and other credit reporting agencies that would allow people to be able to have these numbers included. We know for a fact that this will dramatically improve credit scores for Americans all over this country, particularly women, communities of color. Now, it's not even about borrowing money. Some of you might think, well, we don't necessarily want people to borrow more money. Well, that's a personal choice for them, in my view. But a lot of times they'll check your FICO score or your credit score when you rent an apartment. Or when you want to get a cell phone, they may ask you to give a bigger deposit if your credit invisible. So this has a lot of important uses besides borrowing. And of course, sometimes people do need to do that, and they should be able to do it. So now my bill has already received a hearing, which is a big deal in a Republican-dominated Congress where they really don't hear Democratic bills. But we have 34 sponsors, 12 of whom are Republicans. This is a bipartisan agreement, and the bill provides for affirmative permission for on-time utility and telecom payments to be reported to credit reporting agencies, and also makes it easier to report on-time rental payments for more than 3 million households that receive that. Now, let me just tell you this. This is important. Late payments are reported now anyway. So your on-time payment is not included, but your late payment is included now. So that's not a good scenario. That's not even fair. If we pass this bill, millions of people will benefit. They'll have lower interest rates. They'll have to place fewer deposits. And the credit reporting agencies like it because they're getting more accurate data. And so late payments are reported. In fact, according to the Consumer Financial Products Bureau report they found that 8% of collections on credit reports were from telecom payments and 7% from utilities. So the late payments are being counted against them, but the on-time payments are not counted for them.